All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to get into it.
Good to hear.
Mm.
So today, we're diving into something that's been making a lot of noise. FBI Director Christopher Wray's resignation.
Yeah, big news.
Big news indeed. We've got some interesting sources to work with here.
Oh, yeah.
A Reddit thread from, I think this is Law.
Okay.
Yeah, with legal experts weighing in. Always interesting to hear what they have to say, right?
For sure.
And then an NBC News article that, gives us a bit more context and details.
Perfect.
So the mission today, I guess you could say it's to unpack, what does this resignation actually mean, especially with Trump about to be back in the White House?
Definitely a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe to set the stage, can you give us like a quick rundown of who Wray is, how he got to be FBI director in the first place, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so Christopher Wray, he was actually appointed by Trump back in 2017.
Oh, right. I always forget that.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic given everything that's happened since. Totally.
And he was appointed for a 10-year term. FBI directors usually have these long terms.
I always thought that was interesting, those 10-year terms. Keeps them out of the political winds, right?
Exactly. It's designed to shield them from political pressure, let them focus on, leading the bureau, doing the investigations.
Yeah, makes sense. So then why is Wray stepping down now? I mean, he's got, what, like 3 more years left on his term?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
If you look at what Wray himself has said, he's talking about wanting to avoid further politicization of the FBI.
Okay.
Wants to make sure the Bureau can just focus on, like, its core mission,
Yeah.
stay out of the political fray.
Which is getting harder and harder these days, it seems.
Absolutely. And especially given the, very public clashes that we've seen between Wray and Trump over the last few years.
Oh, yeah, they have definitely butted heads.
Right. I mean, think about the Mar-a-Lago search, that whole thing.
Which, of course, led to Trump's indictment. Exactly, and Trump's been really vocal in his criticism of Wray ever since.
Yeah, claiming that the FBI is biased against him, all that.
Exactly. So, it's almost like Wray stepping down is him trying to, protect the FBI from getting even more tangled up in this political battle.
Right, like he's trying to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah, something like that. And it really raises questions about, okay, well, what happens next?
Yeah, who takes over?
Right. We know Wray's going to stay on until January 20th.
The inauguration, right?
Yep. And then Deputy Director Paul Abate, he's going to be acting director.
Until they can confirm a new director.
Exactly. But then the real question becomes, okay, well, who's Trump going to pick? Who's he going to nominate to be the new FBI director?
Well, he's already said who he wants, right?
Yeah, he's made it pretty clear he wants Kash Patel.
Kash Patel, that name's been coming up a lot lately. Can you remind me, what's his background again?
So Patel, he's an interesting figure, that's for sure. He was an aide to Congressman Devin Nunes.
Nunes, right. Wasn't he involved in, like, the Russia investigation stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And Patel was right there with him, challenging a lot of the findings. He actually served as chief of staff to the acting Secretary of Defense under Trump for a bit, too.
So he's definitely not, what's the word, a neutral observer.
No, not at all. He's very much aligned with Trump's worldview. Been a pretty vocal critic of, what he calls the deep state within the government.
Yeah, that deep state thing. It seems like that idea has really taken hold with a lot of Trump supporters.
Oh, it has. And it's definitely contributed to, this decline in public trust in institutions like the FBI, especially among Republicans.
Which is kind of wild, right? I mean, the FBI has always had, like, a lot of bipartisan support.
Traditionally, yeah. It was always seen as this institution that was above partisan politics.
Exactly. But now with this whole narrative of the FBI being politicized, working against Trump.
Well, it's definitely changed the perception for a lot of people.
And you can see that even playing out in that Reddit thread we mentioned.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Some of the comments are pretty intense. Some people are actually saying that Patel could be even worse than J. Edgar Hoover.
Wow. That's a pretty serious comparison.
Yeah. Hoover, I mean, he was known for using the FBI's power for his own purposes, even going after political opponents.
Right. Not exactly a shining example of ethical leadership.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a real fear that Patel might try to do the same thing. Use the FBI to target Trump's enemies or to further his own agenda.
It's a legitimate concern, and it's one we need to explore more. But before we get into all that, I think we need to take a closer look at Patel himself.
Yeah, that's a good idea. What do we really know about him?
I mean, we know his background, his connection to Trump, but what about his actual approach to law enforcement, his views on the FBI, all of that? What's he actually said he wants to do with the Bureau?
Right, that's the key question.
Yeah.
and we need to try to answer it as best we can.
We do.
So let's dive into that. What's Patel's vision for the FBI?
Well, he's been pretty critical of what he sees as the FBI's overreach in the past. He's argued that the Bureau's been weaponized against political opponents, thinks it needs to be, reined in a bit.
Which, of course, aligns perfectly with Trump's criticism.
Exactly. And it really suggests that under Patel's leadership, we might see a more, restrained FBI.
Okay.
One that's maybe less willing to take on powerful figures, especially those aligned with the president.
I see where you're going with this. But wouldn't that, undermine the FBI's ability to do its job, to really investigate corruption and hold people accountable?
That's the concern.
Yeah. If the FBI is seen as being selective in its investigations, it seems like that would erode public trust even more. And then people who want to operate above the law, they're going to feel even more emboldened.
Absolutely. It's a slippery slope.
It is. So there's a real risk here, it seems like, that the FBI could actually become less effective in its core mission.
Yeah, and that's something we can't ignore. It's a risk we need to take seriously.
And this risk is even more heightened by the fact that, Patel is likely to face a divided Senate during his confirmation process.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The Democrats are already signaling their opposition, They're going to grill him on his past actions, his commitment to the FBI's independence.
Sounds like it's going to be a pretty contentious process.
Definitely, and one that's going to have a huge impact on the future of the FBI.
All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at why Wray's resigning, what Patel's nomination might mean, and of course all the anxiety around what happens next for the FBI. But there's still so much more to dig into.
Oh yeah, we're just getting started.
Exactly. So after, we're just going to keep going, actually. We're going to dive deeper into Patel's background, really analyze what his impact on the FBI could be, and, explore what this all means for the rule of law in America.
It's going to be fascinating.
It is. So let's get back to it. We were talking about Patel's vision for the FBI, right? What has he actually said he wants to do?
So from what we've seen, it seems like...
We were talking about Patel's vision for the FBI, right? What has he actually said he wants to do?
So from what we've seen, it seems like his focus is on, making the FBI great again, as Trump puts it.
Okay, but what does that actually mean in practice?
Right, that's the million-dollar question. Patel's been very critical of what he sees as the FBI's overreach in the past, especially during the whole Russia investigation.
Which makes sense, given his close ties to Trump and, his role in challenging those findings.
Exactly. He's been a vocal supporter of Trump's claims about the deep state working against him.
Right, that idea of a hidden network within the government trying to undermine Trump, it's a powerful narrative, and it's clearly resonated with a lot of people.
It has. And it's created this atmosphere of distrust, this sense that the FBI can't be trusted, that it's been weaponized for political purposes.
And that distrust is evident in that Reddit thread we've been talking about.
Oh, for sure. Some of those legal experts are seriously concerned about what a Patel-led FBI would look like.
Some are even saying he could be worse than J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah, that's a pretty scary thought. Hoover, he was notorious for using the FBI to go after his enemies.
And it seems like there's a real fear that Patel might do the same. That he might use the FBI to target anyone who he sees as a threat to Trump.
It's a legitimate concern. Patel's been very clear about his belief that the FBI needs to be reined in.
But what does reined in actually mean? Does it mean focusing on certain types of crimes and ignoring others? Does it mean going after certain people and giving others a pass?
Those are the questions that a lot of people are asking. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of answers yet.
Right, because Patel hasn't really laid out a specific plan for how he would run the FBI.
Not really. He's mostly stuck to generalities, talking about restoring the FBI's integrity and rebuilding public trust.
Which, of course, sounds good on the surface.
It does. But the devil's in the details.
Exactly. And until we see those details, I think it's going to be very difficult to assess what a Patel-led FBI would actually look like in practice.
I agree. We need to see what concrete steps he plans to take, what policies he intends to implement, how he's going to address those concerns about political bias.
And we also need to see how he handles the confirmation process.
Oh, absolutely. The Senate hearings are going to be crucial.
They are. Because that's where Patel will have to answer some tough questions about his past, his views on the FBI's role, and his plans for the future.
And he's going to be under a microscope, that's for sure. Every word he says will be scrutinized.
He's going to need to walk a very fine line. On the one hand, he needs to appease Trump and his supporters. But on the other hand, he needs to reassure the public and the Senate that he can be an impartial and independent leader.
It's not going to be easy.
No, it's not. But it's a challenge he's clearly willing to take on.
He is, and I think it's important to acknowledge that Patel is a very intelligent and capable individual. He's got a lot of experience in government and law enforcement.
Right, he's not just some random guy that Trump pulled off the street.
Exactly. He's a serious player, and he's not to be underestimated.
So we need to take him seriously, even if we disagree with his views.
Absolutely. We need to engage with his ideas, scrutinize his plans, and hold him accountable for his actions.
Because ultimately, the stakes are incredibly high. We're talking about the future of the FBI, one of the most powerful and important institutions in our country.
And we're talking about the rule of law. If the FBI is compromised, if it becomes just another tool for political power, then the very foundations of our democracy are at risk.
Well said. And on that note, I think we need to take a closer look at Patel's background, his experience, his worldview.
Yeah, let's dig into that. What shaped his thinking? Where does he come from? And what does he really believe?
Because to understand where he might take the FBI, we need to understand where he's been and what drives him.
Absolutely. So let's dive into that next. So digging a bit deeper into Patel's background, right? I mean, where does he come from? What experiences have shaped his thinking?
Yeah, it's all about trying to understand his worldview, right?
Yeah.
Because that's going to give us some clues about how he might approach this whole FBI director job.
Exactly. And, one thing that really stands out to me is his military background. He served in the Army, did a tour in Afghanistan.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So that's got to shape your perspective, seeing things from a military standpoint.
Absolutely. And then, he went on to work as a terrorism prosecutor.
Okay, so he's got some real-world experience with, national security threats, that kind of thing.
He does. And I think that experience is going to inform how he approaches this role, how he sees the FBI's mission.
Interesting. So based on all that, what do you think his priorities would be as FBI director?
Well, I think it's safe to say that national security would be at the top of his list.
Makes sense.
He's been very vocal about the need to combat terrorism, both domestically and internationally.
Which, of course, is something that everyone can agree on.
Right. But the question is, how will he go about it? What methods will he use? Will he prioritize, intelligence gathering over civil liberties?
Right, that's a balance that always has to be struck, especially when it comes to national security.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky, because Patel has also been pretty critical of what he sees as the FBI's overreach in the past. He's argued that the Bureau has, trampled on people's rights in the name of national security.
Which, again, aligns with Trump's views.
It does. And it suggests that Patel might be more willing to, push the boundaries a bit when it comes to surveillance, data collection, that kind of thing.
And that's going to make a lot of people nervous, especially those who are already concerned about government overreach.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a real flashpoint.
It is. And it's going to be fascinating to see how Patel navigates these competing pressures. On the one hand, he's got Trump and his supporters who want a strong, assertive FBI that's focused on, their definition of national security threats.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's got to contend with the FBI's own traditions of independence and impartiality.
And he's got to consider the concerns of the public, many of whom are already wary of government overreach.
So, yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
It is. And I think it's important to remember that, the FBI is not a monolith.
What do you mean?
I mean, it's a large and complex organization with thousands of agents and employees.
Right.
And they all have their own views, their own perspectives, their own interpretations of the FBI's mission.
So even if Patel comes in with a very specific agenda, it doesn't mean that everyone within the FBI is going to fall in line.
Exactly. There's going to be pushback, there's going to be debate, there's going to be a struggle over the direction of the Bureau.
Which is healthy, right? I mean, in a democracy, you want institutions that are able to have these internal debates and disagreements.
Absolutely. It's a sign of a healthy institution.
So I guess what we're really talking about here is the future of the FBI.
We are. And it's a future that's very much in flux right now.
Yeah, it's hard to predict what's going to happen. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be interesting to watch.
It is. And it's important that we all pay attention, that we engage in these debates, that we hold our leaders accountable.
Because the stakes are high. We're talking about the rule of law, the integrity of our institutions, the very foundations of our democracy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the FBI, its future, and what it all means for America.
Yeah, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
We have.
So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep.